The soil was warm between my fingers, the kind of warm that promised tomatoes and thyme if you treated it right. I was halfway through the herb bed when my phone buzzed. Mara's name. I wiped my hands on my jeans and answered. No, hello? Just her clipped voice, like I was a delivery service she forgot to rate. We're coming next week with 6 guests. You can take the shed or head back to the city. I said nothing at first. I could hear Brendan in the background, his voice muffled, unsure. But not once did he step in. Not once did he say, "That's enough, Mara." He didn't even say hello. I looked across the yard at the porch swing I'd bought as a gift to myself, something to sit on while the sun set behind the ridge and the goats settled down. I hadn't even used it yet. Just for a few weeks, she added like it was some gracious offer. They need space. Aaron's doing a detox. Elise has migraines, and Brendan said you have all that land. All that land. Like I hadn't bought it with my own pension. Like it didn't cost me anything to start over at 67. No history here, no childhood memories, just a patch of land I had built into peace. The wind shifted behind me. One of the goats bleated lazily, unaware of the invasion ahead. I stood, wiped my palms again, and walked toward the barn. The air changed when I stepped inside. Cooler, still familiar. I'd spent 40 years cleaning classrooms, scrubbing vomit off floors, and polishing hallways to make other people's children comfortable. 40 years of overtime shifts so Brendan could have baseball gear and college applications. 40 years until my back curved and my hands developed calluses that would never fade. Now after all that, I was expected to give up my hard-earned peace because someone's friend needed a detox. I reached for the old feed ledger and flipped to a blank page. They were coming, and I needed to prepare, just not the way they expected. I walked through the house slowly that evening, the boards creaking beneath my steps like they remembered each stroke of paint I laid down with tired hands. Every corner of this place wore my fingerprints. White trim, butter yellow kitchen, tile backsplash that took me 3 weekends and 2 cracked knuckles. I remembered working late nights cleaning classrooms just to gather enough for the down payment. Not once had Brendan or Mara asked how it was going. Not once had they visited, sent a card, or asked if I was warm in winter. But now suddenly it was all that land and too much space for one person. I let my fingers trail along the kitchen counter, the granite I'd saved an extra year for instead of getting the cheaper laminate. Adam would have been proud. He always said build things to last. He'd been gone 12 years now, dying when Brendan was still in college. Cancer took him quickly, but not before he made me promise to have something that was mine when I retired, not just leftovers from raising everyone else. Jess, he'd said using my full name, Jessica, only when things were serious. You've given enough. When I'm gone and the boys grown, you find your place. Something that makes you feel like those summer mornings when we first met. Remember? I did remember. The lightness, the possibility. This farm was my possibility. I didn't let myself dwell on the insult of Mara's call. I focused on the facts. They were coming, and I had things to do. The guest sheets, my softest ones, 600 thread count, were folded and tucked into storage. In their place, I laid down scratchy old wool blankets from the emergency kit. Still clean, just not cozy. The Wi-Fi router went into the back of my filing cabinet. I labeled the plug, "Don't touch unless you're the one paying the bill." The espresso machine was boxed and taped. A $19 drip pot took its place along with a tin of half-stale store-brand grounds. I turned the thermostat down to 58 for nights and up to 84 during the day. Just enough to irritate, not enough to fix. Then I picked up the phone and called Royce. He answered on the second ring. Jessica or the goat police? I might need to borrow a few friends, I said. Brown ones or loud ones? Both. We agreed on a time. He'd bring them over the night before. I had plenty of hay. The last thing I did was turn on the porch light and sit for a moment on the swing I'd finally finished hanging. I let it creak gently under me, not rocking too much, just breathing. They wanted space. They were about to get it. And the swing would still be mine when they were gone. I hadn't always been this bitter, this defensive. There was a time when Brendan's voice could make my whole day brighter, when his problems were mine to solve, and his joys were my greatest treasures. I'd raised him alone after Adam died, stretching my janitor's salary to cover college application fees and decent clothes. I'd packed his lunch until his sophomore year of high school, when he finally asked me to stop. I'd sat in the cold bleachers for every baseball game, even when my shift started an hour later and I knew I'd have to work until midnight to make up the time. I still remember the day he graduated college, first in our family, wearing the same watch his father had worn to our wedding. He'd hugged me so tight I could feel his heart beating against mine. "I'm going to make you proud, Mom," he'd said. And I believed him. But things changed when he met Mara during his first job at the tech company. She was sleek, ambitious, from a family with summer homes and trust funds. She spoke about Paris like it was a regular weekend destination. She commented on the quaintness of my apartment with its secondhand furniture and faded photos. "She's helping me network," Brendan explained when he started canceling our Sunday phone calls. "Her father knows everyone in the industry." Within a year, he proposed. Within 2, he stopped coming home for holidays unless Mara wanted to. Within 3, he'd started ending our calls with excuses about meetings and deadlines. When I retired and announced I was using my pension to buy a small farm, he looked confused. "A farm? Mom, what do you know about farming?" "Enough to learn," I'd said. "Your father always wanted land." "That was decades ago," he'd replied, as if dreams had expiration dates. I'd ignored his doubts, found this place with its sagging barn and overgrown fields, and set to work. I learned about soil and seeds from library books. I learned about goats from Royce next door, a widower with calloused hands and kind eyes who never made me feel foolish for asking questions. I learned that at 67, I could still swing a hammer, still paint a wall, still create something beautiful. For the first year, Brendan called occasionally to check if I was managing. The calls grew shorter, less frequent. Then they stopped altogether, except for perfunctory birthday and Christmas greetings. Until today. Until all that land became something they wanted. The gravel gave them away before the engine stopped. I watched it all from the motel window 3 miles down the road. Coffee in hand, feet tucked under the blanket. 2 black SUVs polished like parade floats, and 1 oversized rental van chugged up my drive like royalty arriving at a castle they didn't build. Mara stepped out first. Silk trousers, open-toe heels, sunglasses big enough to reflect her own ego back at her. Behind her came the rest. 3 cousins, 1 boyfriend, a guy holding a ring light, and someone named Devin, already filming the dusty barn like it was exotic wildlife. Brendan came last, slower, shoulders tight, like even his body wasn't sure he wanted to be there. He ducked beneath the porch rail and lifted the ceramic frog. I'd left the key there on purpose. I wanted to see who he'd become when no one told him who to be. He found the key like I knew he would. The door creaked open. The screaming started fast. A goat blinked at them from the hallway, perfectly still. One of Royce's louder girls. In the living room, a hen flapped her way across the rug like she owned it. Near the kitchen, hay rustled. Someone had discovered the 2 lambs chewing gently on a fake plant arrangement. Mara's voice shot through the speakers on my laptop. "Is this a joke?" Brendan, no answer. He stood frozen in the entryway, suitcase dangling from one hand, expression unreadable. Maybe he was counting the animals. Maybe he was counting his regrets. A thud. Someone dropped a designer bag. The goat bleated. A cousin yelled about allergies. Mara again, sharp. "Brendan, what is this?" Still nothing. I took another sip of motel coffee and muted the feed. The silence felt earned. Let them explore. Let them rearrange the mess like it was mine. Back at the house, the goats were just getting started. The motel room was quiet except for the hum of the heater. I balanced my laptop on my knees and opened the camera feed. Grainy, yes, but clear enough to see every expression. Royce had helped me set up the system. He'd worked in security before retiring to his farm. "Everyone needs eyes when they're not home," he'd said, attaching small cameras to the kitchen light fixture and living room bookshelf. I'd felt silly then, but I was grateful now. Mara stood in my kitchen like a director on set, one hand on her hip, the other waving as she spoke to the cluster of relatives sprawled on my furniture. "Once she gives up, we'll flip it," she said, her voice crisp even through the small speaker. "Airbnb, fire pit. We can have it ready in 2 months. No laughter, no pushback from Brendan. He just stood there, head down, scrolling his phone as if pretending not to hear. Not even a token protest. I felt something cold move through me. Not shock exactly, but the confirmation of what I already knew. They weren't just visiting. They were planning a takeover. I clicked the record button on my screen. The file name popped up automatically. Kitchen feed 8:37 p.m. I saved it to a new folder labeled Evidence. Then I picked up my phone and called Elaine, my attorney. She'd been with me through the closing on the farm and knew every clause. We'd worked together years ago when she was school counsel and I was head custodian. She'd always treated me with respect, even when administrators looked through me like I was part of the furniture. When she started her own practice, she'd offered me reduced rates, insisting my business was valuable to her. I didn't waste time with pleasantries. "They're trying to flip it," I said. "I have footage." Her voice came back steady. "The deed is clean, Jessica. Sole owner. And don't forget the trust language we built in. Beneficiaries can be removed for misuse or disrespect. It's all there." "I remember," I said. By the time dawn pushed through the motel curtains, my email chimed with draft documents, 2 envelopes ready for courier delivery, legal ink waiting for signatures. I closed the laptop, slid my phone into my bag, and stared at the muted screen for a long time. The kitchen on the feed was empty now. Chairs pushed back. Hay scattered like confetti. Mara's designer bag sat on my counter, one strap chewed. I stood up, smoothed my shirt, and picked up my car keys. It was time to drive back. The papers were ready, and so was I. I thought about Adam as I drove, how his eyes would have flashed with that mixture of anger and disappointment he reserved for those who'd broken trust. He'd been so proud when Brendan graduated, his son in cap and gown, the future bright before him. What would he think now of the man our boy had become? The man who stood silent while his wife planned to steal his mother's refuge? The road curved through hills just beginning to green with spring. I'd chosen this place partly because it reminded me of the camping trips Adam and I took before Brendan was born, before responsibilities and bills and cancer, when we'd lie side by side under stars so bright they seemed to pulse, making plans for a future that would look nothing like what actually came. "I'm doing what you said, Adam," I whispered to the empty car. "I'm finding my place, and I'm keeping it." The courier's truck rumbled up the road just past noon. I was already back at the farm, seated on the porch with a cup of strong coffee and no plans to offer anyone explanations. He handed me 2 envelopes, each thick and heavy with consequence. One labeled Mara Sanders, the other Brendan Maxwell. I didn't need to read them again, but I did anyway. Inside was formal notice revoking any future claim to the property, legal clause enforcing permanent restriction against short-term rental use, a clear warning that further attempts to repurpose or monetize the land would be considered trespass with full legal action to follow. Each page had my name printed in black ink, backed by the signature of my attorney and the trust documents Adam had helped me finalize before he passed. Everything airtight. No wiggle room, no loopholes. I placed the envelopes on the hall table right beside the ceramic frog Brendan once used to find the key. Seemed fitting. I didn't call. I didn't text. I didn't answer the string of missed calls lighting up my phone. Instead, I walked through the house slowly, eyes sweeping across the remnants they'd left behind. A shattered pair of sunglasses under the couch. A spilled bottle of face toner near the fireplace. Hay mixed with glitter from someone's travel pillow. One of the goats had left a parting gift in the guest wing, right beside a luxury duffel bag someone had forgotten in the rush to leave. I didn't clean it. Not yet. I walked to the kitchen, opened the windows, and let the air move through. Then I poured the rest of the coffee, added a splash of milk, and walked back outside. The courier had pulled away. The envelopes sat where I'd left them, and the wind felt clearer somehow, like it had decided whose side it was on. I sat down on the porch swing and watched the road, waiting for the moment they'd come back, only to find everything they assumed was theirs no longer was. By late afternoon, they returned. The caravan of vehicles looked less shiny now, dust coating the sides like a thin layer of reality. Mara was first through the door again, voice already rising before she'd fully entered. I could hear her from my position on the porch. "What is this, Jessica? Legal threats? After everything we've done for you?" I didn't move. Let her come to me. She burst onto the porch, envelope clutched in her manicured hand, Brendan trailing behind. The cousins and camera crew hung back, sensing this wasn't their scene to film. "Did you even read it?" I asked, my voice steady as the hills beyond us. "Of course I read it. You're threatening to sue your own family." Her voice cracked on the word family, like she was trying it out for the first time and finding it didn't fit her mouth right. I took a slow sip of my coffee. "Interesting definition of family you have there, Mara. The kind that plans to flip someone else's home while they're not looking." Her face paled slightly. Brendan stepped forward, finally finding his voice. "Mom, what are you talking about?" I set my mug down carefully. "Kitchen camera, Brendan. Installed last year after someone broke into the Matthews farm down the road. Caught every word of your wife's little business meeting." His eyes widened, darting between Mara and me. She recovered quickly, smoothing her expression like she was applying foundation. "You're overreacting. We were just discussing possibilities, that's all. This place is too much for you to manage alone. We're trying to help." "By turning it into an Airbnb?" I asked. "By making me leave my home so your friends can have their detox vacations?" Mara's jaw tightened. "You can't possibly maintain all this at your age. Be reasonable." "My age." I let the words hang there, heavy with all they implied. My age, that made me invisible. My age, that made me disposable. My age, that apparently erased 40 years of working harder than she ever had. I stood slowly, feeling every creak in my knees but refusing to let it show in my face. "I want you all gone by sunset. Take your friends, your cameras, and your plans with you. This farm is mine. Every nail, every board, every handful of dirt. Mine." Mara opened her mouth to argue, but Brendan put a hand on her arm. "We should go," he said quietly. She jerked away from him. "No, she's being ridiculous. She can't just—" "Actually," I interrupted, "I can, and I have. The papers are quite clear, Mara." Neither of you has any claim to this property now or in the future. It goes to the Land Conservation Trust when I'm gone. You try to contest it, and the recordings of your little planning session go to the family court judge." I watched her face as the reality sank in. All those careful calculations, all those renovation budgets and booking projections, evaporating like morning dew. She looked at Brendan, expecting him to fight for her, to argue with the stubborn old woman I'd become in her eyes. But he just stood there, shoulders slumped, like he'd finally seen the script of his life and realized he'd been miscast. "Fine," Mara finally snapped. "Keep your rundown farm. Keep your sad, lonely existence. Come on, Brendan, we're leaving." She stormed off the porch, barking orders at her entourage to pack up and go. Brendan lingered, eyes on the floorboards. "I didn't know," he said softly. "About flipping it, I mean. I thought we were just visiting." I wanted to believe him. The part of me that remembered rocking him to sleep, bandaging his scraped knees, celebrating his small victories. That part wanted to say it was okay, that I understood. But the woman who'd scrubbed floors until her hands bled to give him a better life, who'd been discarded the moment he found shinier people to impress, that woman needed more than empty words. "What did you think would happen, Brendan?" I asked. "You bring 6 strangers to my home, tell me to sleep in the shed and expect... what? Gratitude? Compliance?" He flinched. "I should have called first. Ask properly." "Yes," I agreed. "You should have, but you didn't. You let her speak for you, like you always do. You stood there while she planned to take my home and you said nothing." His face crumpled slightly, and for a moment I saw the boy who'd come to me with his problems, not the man who'd chosen to forget me. But then Mara's voice cut through the air, calling his name with the sharp edge of command, and whatever softness I'd glimpsed vanished. "I have to go," he said. I nodded once. "Yes, you do." He turned and walked down the steps, each footfall a small surrender. I watched him go, this son I hardly recognized, joining the woman who'd remade him into someone I didn't know. They drove away in a cloud of dust, leaving only tire marks in the gravel and the fading sound of expensive engines to prove they'd been there at all. I picked up my coffee mug, now cold, and walked back inside to begin cleaning up the mess they'd left behind. The house felt too quiet after they left. I'd grown accustomed to solitude, even welcomed it after years of institutional noise. The squeak of buffing machines, the clatter of locker doors, the endless chatter of students who looked through me as if custodians were invisible. But this silence felt different, heavier. I switched on the radio to fill the space while I cleaned, letting Patsy Cline's voice keep me company as I swept up hay and feathers. An old college station played the kind of music Adam used to love. Folksy guitars and honest voices singing about lost loves and hard truths. As I worked, I found more evidence of their brief occupation. A sleek business card tucked under the sofa, Highland Valley Properties, luxury vacation rentals. A notebook with Mara's handwriting listing renovation estimates and projected income. A brochure for farm-to-table experiences, the kind wealthy city people paid fortunes for, circled and annotated in the margins. It hadn't been an impulsive idea then. They'd been planning this, researching it, budgeting for it. All while I planted my herbs and fixed my fences, imagining this place would be my final home. The thought chilled me despite the afternoon warmth. How easily they'd assumed they could erase me, like wiping chalk from a board. I gathered the evidence into a manila folder, adding it to the recordings I'd made. Insurance, Elaine would call it. Proof, if they ever tried to contest what I'd done. The kitchen was the worst. Muddy footprints on my scrubbed floors. Coffee rings on the counters I'd polished. Fingerprints smudging the windows I'd spent 3 days washing when I first moved in. I cleaned methodically, the way I'd been trained. Start high, work down. Remove debris before scrubbing. Disinfect last. My phone rang twice more. Brendan both times, but I let it go to voicemail. What was there to say? I'd seen their true intentions. I'd acted to protect what was mine. No amount of stammering explanations would change that. It was nearly dusk when I heard tires on the gravel again. Not the purr of luxury vehicles this time, but the familiar rumble of Royce's old pickup. I dried my hands on a dish towel and went to meet him. He stood by his truck, hat in hands, looking at me with concern in his weathered face. "Thought I'd check on you," he said. "Saw the fancy cars tear out of here like the devil himself was chasing 'em." I managed a tired smile. "Something like that." He nodded toward the barn. "Want help getting the animals back home?" "Please." We worked side by side, coaxing goats and chickens into his trailer. Royce didn't ask questions, didn't push for details. That was his way. Present, but not prying. It was one of the things I appreciated most about him. Only when we'd loaded the last hen did he speak again. "Was it as bad as you thought it'd be?" I leaned against the barn door, feeling the solid wood at my back. "Worse," I admitted. "They were planning to turn this place into a rental property. Push me out, cash in." He shook his head, disgust plain on his face. "Your own kin?" "My son stood there while his wife laid it all out. Didn't say a word against it." Royce was quiet for a long moment, turning his hat in his hands. "My Daniel went through a phase like that," he finally said. "After he married Patricia. Got so he couldn't see past her once to what was right. Took their divorce for him to find his backbone again." I hadn't known that about Royce's son. We shared coffee and fence repairs, not family histories. It made me wonder what other stories we held back, what other disappointments we carried silently. "Brendan's been lost to me for years," I said. "This was just confirmation." Royce nodded, understanding without needing more explanation. "Well," he said finally, "they're gone now, and you're still here. That counts for something." I looked around at my small farm, at the sunset painting the fields gold, at the porch swing moving gently in the evening breeze. "Yes," I agreed. "It does." After Royce left, taking his animal accomplices with him, I sat on the porch with a glass of wine, a small luxury I rarely indulged in. The night air carried the scent of spring soil and distant rain. I scrolled through my phone, looking at the missed calls and texts from Brendan. "Mom, please call me back. We need to talk about this. Mara's upset, but we can work it out. Please don't cut us off like this." No actual apology, no acknowledgement of what they'd planned to do, just the assumption that I would eventually relent, forgive, allow myself to be managed for the sake of peace, as I always had. I set the phone down and took a sip of wine, letting the tartness linger on my tongue. Adam would have understood what I was feeling. He'd always seen through pretense, called things by their real names. "They think you're done, Jess," he would have said. "They think your story's over, so they can write the ending for you." But I wasn't done. Far from it. I pulled out my notebook, the one where I kept track of planting schedules and feed rotations. On a fresh page, I began to make a new list. 1. Change locks. 2. Update security system. 3. Consult with Elaine. Power of attorney. 4. Review will and medical directives. 5. Join Farm Conservation Alliance. It wasn't about spite, though the hurt was still raw. It was about protection. It was about claiming the life I'd earned after giving so much of myself away. It was about making sure that when I was truly done, when my story did reach its final chapter, it would end on my terms, not theirs. I finished my wine as the first stars appeared overhead, pinpricks of light in the deepening blue. Tomorrow would be time enough for action. Tonight was for resolve. 3 days passed before I saw another car on the road. I'd already taken the goats back to Royce's pasture and scrubbed the kitchen until it smelled like soap and earth again. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet I'd bought it for. I spent those days reinforcing my boundaries, not just the legal ones Elaine had helped me establish, but the physical ones as well. I changed the locks, installed a new security system with Royce's help, and posted no trespassing signs at the property line. Small acts of self-preservation that felt like declarations of independence. Elaine had called to confirm the papers had been legally served and recorded. "They've been officially removed as beneficiaries," she said. "The land trust is now your sole heir. Unless you change your mind, of course." I thought about that as I worked in the garden, turning soil for summer vegetables. Would I change my mind? If Brendan came back, truly repentant, would I let him back into my will, my future, my trust? I didn't know. The hurt was too fresh, the betrayal too complete. For now, the land trust seemed the safer choice. This place would remain what Adam and I had dreamed of. A sanctuary, not a profit center. That afternoon, a dusty sedan eased into the drive. No black SUVs, no camera gear, no designer luggage. Just Brendan stepping out slowly like a man who'd been walking for miles. His shirt was wrinkled, hair uncombed, eyes dulled by something heavier than travel. "She left," he said before I could open my mouth. "Took the train to LA. Said she didn't marry into a barn." I nodded once. No triumph in it, no satisfaction. Just a fact landing where it belonged. "I saw the plans," he continued when I didn't speak. "The renovation budgets, the marketing strategy. She had it all worked out. Been working on it for months, apparently." He rubbed his face with both hands. "I swear I didn't know the extent of it, Mom. I thought we were just visiting, maybe talking about helping you manage the place as you got older." "And the part about me sleeping in the shed?" I asked, my voice steady. "Was that her idea too?" He flinched. "I should have said something, I know that. I got used to letting her lead. It was easier that way." "Easier for whom?" He had no answer for that. I reached behind me and held out a broom. "You want to stay here? Start there." He stared at the broom for a second, then took it without a word. The sound of bristles against wood followed him down the hall as he began to sweep the mess his crowd had left behind. He didn't ask for a room. He didn't ask for coffee. He just worked. I watched him from the kitchen doorway, this grown son of mine, bending to pick up debris with hands that had never known real labor. He'd been an indoor child, preferring books and computers to the camping trips Adam tried to interest him in. He'd gone straight from college to an office job, his hands staying soft while mine grew calloused. Yet there was something of Adam in the set of his shoulders now, in the determined line of his mouth, a glimpse of the man he might have been without Mara's influence. "I found something," he said after an hour of silent cleaning. He held up a small notebook, its leather cover worn from years in a pocket. It was wedged behind the bookcase. I recognized it immediately. Adam's old fishing journal, where he'd recorded catches and weather conditions, thoughts that came to him by the water. I'd wondered where it had gone when we packed his things. "He used to take it everywhere," I said, reaching for it. Brendan handed it over carefully. "I remember. He'd write in it at my baseball games, too. Said watching me play was like fishing. Long stretches of waiting for moments of pure excitement." The memory surprised me. Not that Adam had said it, but that Brendan remembered. There had been so little evidence lately that he held on to anything from before Mara. I opened the journal, finding Adam's neat handwriting filling the pages. Dates, locations, weather notes, and in the margins, small observations about life, about family, about the future. April 18th, bass not biting, cold front. Brendan got into state, thinking about land up north when we retire. Jess would love the quiet. Land up north. This land. He'd been planning it all along. I closed the book, holding it against my chest like a talisman. He wanted this place for us. For after. Brendan nodded. I know. That's why. He hesitated. That's why I came back. Not because Mara left, though that was the wake-up call I needed. But because I remembered Dad talking about you having a place of your own someday. A place no one could take from you. His voice broke slightly on the last words, the full weight of what he'd almost done settling between us. I almost took it from you, he said softly. I almost helped her take it from you. I didn't rush to comfort him, to say it was okay. It wasn't okay. Some breaches can't be mended with quick forgiveness. Yes, I said simply. You almost did. That evening he cooked a plain meal of beans and eggs without being asked, set 2 plates down, and ate in silence. No complaints, no excuses. He was up before sunrise the next morning, boots on, moving hay with slow determination. Not once did he mention the papers or the goats or Mara. Not once did he ask for forgiveness. I poured a second mug of coffee and left it on the railing without a word. By the time the sun crested the ridge, he was already in the barn, learning how to fit himself into a life he'd once dismissed. And for the first time in years, the sound of his work filled the space where my disappointment used to sit, carrying us both into whatever came next. Brendan started spending more time in the barn than in the house. I'd see him through the window, sleeves rolled up, sweat soaking through his shirt as he hauled hay or worked with the feed bins. He began keeping a small journal on the tack shelf. Nothing dramatic, just quick scribbles between chores. I never asked what he wrote. Royce stopped by now and then, showing him how to check hooves, mend fencing without wasting nails, and how to handle a stubborn goat without losing his patience. Brendan listened, learned. Blisters formed where office hands had once held nothing heavier than a steering wheel. He didn't complain about those either. I watched, but I didn't praise him. Not yet. He hadn't earned that part. A week into his stay, I found him studying Adam's fishing journal in the evening, tracing the handwriting with his fingertips as if trying to absorb something of his father through the ink. He was so certain about everything, Brendan said without looking up. Even when he was wrong, he was confidently wrong. It made me smile despite myself. That's true. Your father never met a decision he couldn't make in under 5 minutes. You're like that too in your way, he said. Decisive. Had to be, I replied. Single mother working full-time didn't have the luxury of indecision. He nodded slowly, taking that in. I've never been good at it. Deciding things, I mean. Always second-guessing myself. He closed the journal gently. That's why Mara... He trailed off, unwilling or unable to finish. I understood anyway. That's why Mara took control. That's why he let her. Your father wasn't born decisive, I said after a moment. He learned it, first in the Navy, then raising you. Necessity teaches you to trust yourself. How did you learn it? I thought about that. About being 19 and pregnant. About finishing high school through night classes while working days. About deciding to take the custodial job because it had health insurance when Adam got sick the first time. By having no other choice, I finally said. One morning, just after sunrise, I stepped outside and found 2 mugs sitting on the porch railing, one filled with coffee the way I like it. Splash of milk, no sugar. I didn't say a word, just picked it up and sat beside him. We drank in silence, the air cool and the light still soft across the pasture. Birds stirred in the distance, and the horses were starting to move through the field. He didn't look at me when he finally said it. I knew what she was doing, I just didn't know how to stop it. I didn't soften. You didn't try. He nodded once. No excuse, no defense, just the truth laid out like gravel under boots. We finished our coffee without another word, but something had shifted. Maybe not healed, but acknowledged. That mattered more than anything he could have said with flowers or gifts. Later that afternoon, I passed the barn and saw him helping Royce fix the north gate, careful this time not to over-tighten the hinge. His movements were slower now, more thoughtful. The journal sat open on a bale of hay, pen tucked beside it, as if he planned to come back and write something down the moment his hands were clean. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel alone out there. Not completely. Over the next few days, we developed a routine of sorts. Coffee on the porch at sunrise. Separate work throughout the morning, me in the garden, him in the barn or the fields. Lunch eaten in companionable silence. Afternoons spent on whatever needed fixing. Dinner prepared by whoever finished their tasks first. No deep conversations, no dramatic apologies, just the quiet rhythm of two people learning to exist in the same space again. One evening, as I was preparing to change a light bulb in the hallway, Brendan appeared with the stepladder before I could ask. He didn't make a show of it, didn't try to take over completely. Just held the ladder steady while I worked, a simple acknowledgement that while I was capable, support was still welcome. "You've made this place remarkable," he said as I descended. I didn't appreciate it before, but I do now. "Thank you," I said, meaning it. He hesitated, then asked, "Could I bring some of my things from storage? Just clothes and books. Nothing of hers." I considered it. Having Brendan's belongings here would change things, make his presence less temporary, more intentional. "Yes," I decided. "The blue room is yours if you want it." Relief washed over his face. "Thank you. I'll drive to the city this weekend." "Take the truck," I offered, "more space than your car." A small thing, this exchange of trust. The keys to my truck, the blue room with the morning light. Not forgiveness exactly, but possibility. That night I sat on the porch swing longer than usual, thinking about Adam's journal, about decisiveness, about the sun working his way back from the edge of being a stranger. The moon rose full and bright, casting silver across the fields. In the barn, a light still shone where Brendan was finishing some task he'd set for himself. I remembered something my grandmother used to say. Family isn't who you're born to, it's who you choose to become because of them. I'd been so focused on who Brendan had chosen to become with Mara, someone distant, dismissive, weak-willed, that I hadn't left space for him to choose differently. Maybe that was changing now. For both of us. The wind started howling just past midnight, sharp and erratic, the kind that shakes windows and knocks over porch chairs. I was already halfway out of bed when I heard the crash. Metal on dirt, followed by the distinct bleat of panic. I grabbed my coat and flashlight, but by the time I reached the back door, Brendan was already up, pulling on boots. "It's the east fence," he said, out of breath but clear. Something snapped. I heard it from my window. I followed him into the dark, the storm biting through every layer of flannel and wool. We found one of the younger goats, Nana, dragging a hind leg, trembling wide-eyed in the mud. A broken panel of fencing lay nearby, twisted by the wind. "I'll get the truck," I said, already turning toward the shed. Brendan's hand stopped me. "You stay," he said. "I'll go. You've done enough storms." I hesitated, but something in his voice settled me. Not command, not ego, just commitment. "First aid kit's in the mudroom cabinet," I told him. "And call Royce. He might have a splint that'll work better than what we've got." Brendan nodded once and was gone, the darkness swallowing him before he reached the house. I knelt beside Nana, whispering soothing nonsense as I assessed the injury. Not broken, I thought, but badly sprained. She'd need rest and care, but she'd recover. The storm didn't let up. Rain came next, driving and cold, soaking through my already inadequate protection. I managed to move Nina to the partial shelter of an oak tree, using my own coat to keep her from shivering. Time stretched, each minute feeling longer as I watched the driveway for headlights, for signs of Brendan's return. Doubt crept in with the cold. What if he'd decided this was too much? What if the comfort of his old life suddenly seemed more appealing than mud and injured goats and midnight emergencies? What if he'd just left? I pushed the thought away, focusing on Nina, on the practical needs of the moment. But the fear lingered, a cold companion in the storm. He was gone for over 2 hours. The storm didn't let up. I stayed by Nina with dry blankets and calming words, doing what I could to keep her breathing even. Every gust of wind made me wonder if I'd misjudged him again. Then headlights sliced through the rain. The truck door slammed. Brendan staggered into view with a supply bag in one arm and a soaked flannel clinging to his skin. His knuckles were cracked and his hands shook as he kneeled beside Nina. "Roads were washed out near town," he explained, unpacking supplies. "Had to take the long way around. Royce wasn't home, but his daughter gave me these." He held up a professional-looking splint and medications. "She's a vet tech. Said to call if we need more help." Together, we worked on Nina's leg, cleaning, medicating, wrapping, adjusting the splint until it supported without restricting. Brendan's movements were sure despite his exhaustion, his focus complete. When Nina finally settled onto the hay, pain easing, he sat back on his heels with a sigh of relief. "We should get her to the barn," he said. "It's too exposed out here." I nodded, already gathering the supplies. "Can you carry her?" Yes. He lifted Nina carefully, cradling her against his chest like something precious, and began the slow walk to the barn. I followed with the medical kit, watching his careful steps, the way he adjusted his hold to minimize the goat's discomfort. The barn was warm compared to the howling night outside. We settled Nina in a clean stall with fresh water and feed within easy reach. Brendan didn't collapse when the work was done. He checked the barn lights, made sure the other animals were calm, then sat beside the feed pile, mud up to his knees, like it was the most natural place in the world to be. I stood in the shadows and watched him breathe, steady and quiet. I remembered whispering once, years ago, I raised a boy who became a man too late. And now, in the soft light of a storm-warmed barn, I said it again. Only this time I added, but maybe not too late forever. Brendan looked up, surprised. I wasn't sure if he'd heard me, wasn't sure if I wanted him to. But his eyes, so like Adam's, held mine for a moment before he nodded, just once, acknowledging something between us that didn't need words. We stayed in the barn until the storm passed, taking turns checking on Nina, speaking little but sharing the space with a comfort I hadn't felt in his presence for years. When dawn finally broke, pale and water-washed, we walked back to the house together, mud-caked and exhausted. "Get some rest," I told him at the door. "You've earned it." It was the closest I'd come to praise since he'd arrived, and we both knew it. He didn't smile, didn't make a show of gratitude, just nodded again, understanding the weight of what I'd offered. "You too," he said. "I'll check on Nina in a few hours." I watched him climb the stairs to the blue room, shoulders stooped with fatigue but moving with purpose. Something had shifted between us in the night, in the shared work of saving something vulnerable. Not forgiveness exactly, that would take longer, but recognition, of effort, of change, of possibility. I thought of Adam, of what he would say if he could see our son now, mud-covered and responsible, putting something else's needs before his comfort. He'd be proud, I decided. Not of the years wasted following Mara's lead, but of this moment, this choice to be better. I was a little proud, too, of both of us. The days after the storm took on a different quality. The necessary work of repairing fence damage and checking on Nana created a shared purpose that changed our interactions. We still didn't talk much, but the silence felt companionable rather than strained. Brendan continued his barn chores and joined me in the garden as well, learning the names of herbs and the right depth for planting seeds. One evening as we sat on the porch after dinner, he asked, "What made you choose this place specifically? There must have been easier properties, closer to town." I considered the question, looking out over the fields glowing golden in the setting sun. The first time I stood on this spot, I could hear Adam's voice in my head, clear as day. "This is it, Jess. This is where you'll find your peace." It wasn't practical or logical. It was just right. Brendan nodded, understanding. Dad always trusted his gut. "So do I said. "When it matters." He was quiet for a moment, then said, "I stopped trusting mine. Somewhere along the way, I just outsourced all my decisions. To Mara, to my boss, to whatever seemed easiest." It was the most direct acknowledgement he'd made of how he'd lost himself. I appreciated the honesty of it. "You can learn to trust yourself again," I told him. "It's like any muscle, gets stronger with use." He smiled slightly. "Is that why you're giving me space to make my own choices here? Exercise the muscle?" I hadn't thought of it that way, but he wasn't wrong. I hadn't micromanaged his chores or constantly checked his work. I'd let him figure things out, make mistakes, learn from them. "Maybe," I admitted, "or maybe I'm just tired of telling people what to do." That made him laugh, a genuine sound I hadn't heard in too long. Fair enough. The conversation shifted to practical matters. Which section of fence still needed repair, whether the tomato seedlings were ready to transplant. But something had eased between us, a recognition of growth on both sides. Royce visited more frequently now, not just to help with the farm, but to share meals and stories. He brought his daughter Lynn sometimes, the vet tech who'd provided Nana's splint. She was in her 40s, divorced, with a quiet competence that reminded me of myself at that age. I noticed how Brendan straightened when she arrived, how he listened intently when she spoke about animal care. One afternoon I overheard them talking in the barn, Lynn explaining the finer points of hoof maintenance while Brendan took notes in his journal. There was nothing romantic in it, just two people sharing knowledge, but it struck me how different he seemed from the man who'd arrived with Mara. More present, more genuine, more himself. That evening, Brendan knocked on the screen door just after breakfast, papers in hand. He didn't wait for me to invite him in, just stepped onto the porch like he belonged there again. Maybe he did. "I need you to read this," he said. I set my coffee down and took the stack. The top page was titled, "Conservation Easement Agreement." My heart stilled. He'd worked with the local land trust, filed the paperwork, had the soil surveys done, even included historical documentation of the original boundary lines. All of it legally binding. "This locks it in," he said, quieter now. "Even when you're gone. No resorts, no flipping, no one paving over the garden for a parking lot." I kept reading. Terms, clauses, perpetual protection. The kind of thing Adam used to talk about but never got around to formalizing. "I want it to stay this way," Brendan said. "I didn't build it. I didn't earn it. But I see it now. What it is. What it means." My fingers hovered over his signature at the bottom of the last page. His handwriting had changed. It was steadier than I remembered, firm without flourish. No performance. "You sure?" I asked. This would mean giving up any future financial gain from the property. No selling to developers, no commercial ventures. Just land, preserved as it was. He nodded. "This isn't about me anymore. It's about what matters." I looked at the garden, the field, the goats chasing each other past the old scarecrow that had lost its hat last week. I thought about what it had taken to get here. Every scraped knee, every missed weekend, every silent night, waiting for someone to understand why I'd chosen this life. Then I picked up the pen. I signed. He didn't smile. Not in a showy way. Just exhaled like he'd been holding his breath for years. We didn't hug. We didn't need to. Instead, he walked down the porch steps and went back to the barn, the papers still in my hand. My coffee now cold but untouched. A breeze lifted the corner of the easement where our names met in ink. Tomorrow I'd file it. Today I'd let the moment root itself. That evening I found Brendan sitting on the back steps, staring at the sunset. I sat beside him, not touching, but close enough to share the moment. "I've been thinking about what's next," he said without preamble. "After the easement is filed, after Nana's leg heals completely." "Oh?" My heart tightened, preparing for him to say he was leaving, returning to his old life or starting a new one elsewhere. Lynn mentioned they need help at the animal rescue where she volunteers. Someone with basic carpentry skills to fix enclosures, maintain the grounds. He glanced at me sideways. "Thought I might offer a few days a week. The rest of the time I could help here, if that's okay." Relief flooded through me, though I kept my expression neutral. "That sounds sensible," he said. "The truck's yours to use when you need it." He nodded, then added, "I found an online course, too, Sustainable Agriculture. Thought it might be useful for the garden and fields." "It would," I agreed. We sat in comfortable silence as the light faded from the sky, stars appearing one by one in the darkening blue. No grand declarations, no dramatic promises, just practical steps toward a future neither of us had imagined when he first arrived. "Mom," he said finally, using the word deliberately, testing its weight after so long avoiding it. "Thank you for not making this easy." I understood what he meant. Thank you for holding the line, for demanding better, for not accepting less than I deserved. "You're welcome," I said simply. Later, as I prepared for bed, I found Adam's journal on my nightstand, open to a page I hadn't noticed before. Near the back, dated just months before his death, he'd written, "Told Brendan today to always look for the truth beneath what people say they want. Jess doesn't talk much about her dreams, but I see them in how she touches soil, how she stops to watch birds, how she saves those travel magazines about countryside cottages. She thinks I don't notice. I notice everything about her. Always have. When I'm gone, I hope he remembers to look, to really see her." My throat tightened. After all these years, Adam's voice reaching through time, reminding our son to see me as a person with dreams, not just a mother with responsibilities. And finally, Brendan was looking. I closed the journal gently, placed it back on the nightstand, and turned out the light. Outside, the night sounds of the farm continued. Crickets, distant owl calls, the soft movement of animals settling for sleep, the sounds of home, the sounds of peace. In the room down the hall, I heard Brendan moving around, preparing for the next day. Not a visitor anymore, not quite family again yet, but something in between, something growing toward reconnection. It was enough for now. Summer arrived with relentless heat and unexpected visitors. My granddaughter Lily, Brendan's daughter from his first marriage, called one afternoon, her voice hesitant over the phone. "Dad says I can visit for 2 weeks before school starts," she said. "If that's okay with you, Grandma." I hadn't seen Lily in person for almost 3 years. After Brendan's divorce from her mother, Karen, Mara had made it clear she wasn't interested in part-time parenting, and Lily's visits had become increasingly rare. She was 15 now, caught in that space between childhood and adulthood, trying to make sense of the fractured family she'd inherited. "Of course it's okay," I told her. "Your dad can have the room ready by Saturday." Brendan was in the fields when I gave him the news. His face brightened immediately. "She actually called? That's wonderful. I wasn't sure she'd want to come." "Why wouldn't she?" I asked. He looked away, embarrassment crossing his features. "We haven't exactly been close these past few years. Mara didn't like having her around, said it complicated things, and He faltered, the admission painful. "I didn't fight hard enough for time with her." Another casualty of his time with Mara. Another relationship that needed rebuilding. "Well, she's coming now," I said. "That's what matters." The day before Lily's arrival, Brendan threw himself into preparations with an energy that bordered on anxiety. He cleaned the guest room twice, drove to town for new bedding, even asked Lynn for advice on what a teenage girl might want or need. "She's not a foreign species," I told him, amused by his nervousness. "She's your daughter." "That's the problem," he admitted. "I don't really know who she is anymore. What she likes, what she cares about." It was an honest admission, and it made me wonder how many other relationships he'd neglected during his years with Mara. How much reconnecting he still had to do. Lily arrived on Saturday afternoon, driven by Karen, who stayed just long enough for awkward greetings before heading back to the city. Our granddaughter stood on the porch, backpack slung over one shoulder, trying to look nonchalant, though her eyes darted everywhere, taking in the farm with barely disguised curiosity. She was taller than I remembered, with Adam's eyes and her mother's determined chin. Her hair was shorter, dyed purple at the tips, and she had a small nose ring that definitely wasn't there the last time I'd seen her. She was beautiful in that unfinished way of teenagers, all potential and sharp edges. "Nice place," she said, aiming for casual but not quite hitting it. "Very rural." "That's one word for it," I agreed. "Hungry?" That broke the tension. She grinned, suddenly looking much younger. "Starving." Over lunch, the three of us navigated the delicate waters of reacquaintance. Lily was guarded with Brendan, answering his questions politely but without elaboration. With me, she was more open, asking about the farm, the animals, how long I'd lived here. 2 years, I told her. After a lifetime of fluorescent lights and linoleum floors, I wanted sky and dirt. "Dad said you were a janitor," she said. "At his school." "Custodial supervisor," I corrected, not unkindly. "I managed a team of 8 by the time I retired." She nodded, absorbing this. "That's cool. Managing people is hard." "It is," I agreed, "but so is scrubbing floors. Different kinds of hard." Brendan watched our exchange with a mixture of envy and admiration. I could see him taking mental notes, learning how to talk to his daughter by watching me do it. After lunch, I suggested Brendan show Lily the farm. "There's a new foal at Royce's place, too," I added. "Just 3 weeks old." Lily's eyes lit up. "A foal? Like a baby horse?" "Exactly like that," Brendan said, smiling at her enthusiasm. "Want to see?" They set off together, Lily maintaining a careful distance but clearly interested. I watched from the porch as they crossed the field, Brendan pointing out features of the land, Lily nodding, asking occasional questions. Not quite comfortable yet, but trying. Both of them trying. That evening, after Lily went to bed, Brendan sat with me on the porch, nursing a cup of decaf. "She's so different," he said softly, "and yet exactly the same." "That's teenagers for you," I replied. "Changing every day, but still themselves underneath it all." "She hardly talks to me," he admitted. "But she opened right up with you." "I'm safer," I explained. "I'm not the one who left." He flinched, but didn't argue. "How do I fix it?" "I thought about that," about all the broken relationships in our family and what it would take to heal them. Slowly, I finally said. Consistently. You show up, you keep showing up, and eventually she'll believe you'll keep showing up. Like I'm doing here, he said, understanding. Yes, I agreed. Like that. Over the next few days, Lily began to settle into the rhythm of the farm. She helped me in the garden, surprisingly knowledgeable about plants for a city kid. Mom has a community garden plot, she explained. I help sometimes. She was still reserved with Brendan, but the wall between them showed small cracks. She agreed to help him with the morning feeding, asked questions about the animals, even laughed at his admittedly terrible jokes. Small steps, but meaningful ones. One morning I found them at the kitchen table, heads bent over Adam's fishing journal. Brendan was telling her stories about her grandfather, about fishing trips and baseball games. He sounds cool, Lily said. I wish I could have met him. He would have adored you, I told her from the doorway. He loved strong-willed women. She looked pleased at that, at being called a woman rather than a girl, at the suggestion of strength. Later that day, as Brendan worked in the barn, Lily helped me prepare dinner. She chopped vegetables with careful precision, asking occasional questions about my life, about her father as a child. Was he always so, quiet? She asked. No, I said honestly. He was a talkative child, always full of ideas and plans. That changed over time. She absorbed this. Because of Mara? I considered my answer carefully. Partly, but we all change based on who we're with, who we're trying to please. Your dad lost himself for a while. He's finding his way back now. Is that why he's here? Because she left? He's here because he chose to stay, I corrected gently. After she left, yes, but staying was his choice, an important one. Lily nodded, thoughtful. Mom says he never made his own choices with Mara, that she decided everything. Your mother's not wrong, I acknowledged. But people can change, Lily, if they want to badly enough. Do you think he has? The question was direct, her eyes searching mine for honesty. I think he's trying, I said, really trying, and that matters. She went back to chopping, but I could see her turning my words over in her mind, testing them against her own observations. Smart girl. She wouldn't accept easy answers or false reassurances. That night, a summer thunderstorm rolled in, spectacular and fierce. Lily, who'd never been fond of storms, appeared in the living room looking embarrassed but clearly anxious. Want company? I offered, patting the sofa beside me. She nodded, curling up with a blanket as thunder rattled the windows. Brendan joined us, bringing hot chocolate for all three of us. We sat together as the storm raged, sharing stories to distract Lily from her fear. Your dad used to hide in the closet during storms, I told her, until he was about 10. Mom, Brendan protested, but he was smiling. Really? Lily asked, interested despite herself. Really, I confirmed. He had a special blanket and everything. It was a sensible fear, Brendan defended himself. Thunder is loud. Lily laughed, a genuine sound that seemed to surprise all of us. I guess I come by it honestly then. You come by a lot of things honestly, I said. Your grandfather's eyes, your dad's smile, your grandmother's stubborn streak. Definitely that last one, Brendan added, risking the tease. Instead of pulling away, Lily smiled at him, small but real. A bridge, being rebuilt one plank at a time. As the storm passed and the night grew late, Lily's eyelids began to droop. She fell asleep on the sofa, head resting against my shoulder, looking younger in sleep than her 15 years. Brendan watched her with a mixture of love and regret so palpable it hurt to see. I've missed so much, he whispered. But not everything, I reminded him. She's still here, still growing, still becoming. He nodded, determination settling over his features. I won't miss any more, whatever it takes. I believed him. The man sitting across from me was not the same one who'd arrived with Mara, not the same one who'd stood silent while she planned to take my home. This was a man finding his voice again, his spine, his purpose. This was a man becoming worthy of his daughter's trust. The porch is loud again, but it's not chaos. Brendan is out front with Royce, both of them hammering a gate that keeps sagging no matter how many times it gets fixed. A pot of coffee brews inside. One of Royce's goats naps near the steps like she owns the place. Probably does by now. I sit in my rocking chair, notebook on my lap. No grand declarations, no babies in arms, no one performing gratitude. Just this life. Quiet. Chosen. Mine. Brendan passes by on his way to the barn, dust in his hair, new boots already scuffed and broken in. He doesn't ask for anything, doesn't try to explain away the past. He just moves steadily, purposefully, like someone who knows they're finally walking their own path. Sometimes he pauses and asks about feed rotation. Other times he doesn't say a word, just nods as he walks by. I don't need more than that. I've learned silence can mean presence, too. Lily's visit ended 2 weeks ago, but she calls regularly now, telling Brendan about school, asking my advice about her garden plot. She's planning to return for Thanksgiving, maybe Christmas, too. Family, rebuilding itself one conversation at a time. I flip the page in my notebook. It's not a will or a letter, just notes about what needs pruning in the back lot, which window still sticks when it rains, how much fencing we'll need before winter. Nothing dramatic, just things that matter. The screen door creaks behind me. Brendan sets a fresh cup of coffee on the rail without a word. I look up and meet his eyes. He nods once. I nod back. We watch the sun climb together, gold spilling over the pasture like warm paint. This place was never meant to be a monument or a prize. It was never about legacy in the way people usually mean it. It was always about doing the work, holding the space, mending what others break without apology. I take a sip of the second cup and lean back, the chair creaking beneath me like an old friend, telling me I've done enough for today. Some things, I say into the morning air, aren't inherited. They're earned. Every bit of them. The wind answers by lifting the corner of my notebook. I let it.